Last August, I shaved a $1 bar of plain soap into a gallon of water, sprayed it across 2 rows of tomatoes, and 48 hours later, every single hornworm on those plants was dead. Not gone. Dead on the stem. I ran the same test against the commercial product my neighbour was using at $23 a bottle, and the soap bar killed more worms faster. Here is what bothers me. This method was published in extension bulletins through the 1950s. By the late 1970s, the synthetic pesticide industry had moved the recommendation out of the standard literature, and you will not find it in any modern garden centre handout. I tested it for 3 seasons. Stay with me to the end because I'm also going to show you the one ingredient I add to the spray that doubles how long it lasts on the leaf. Let me back up and tell you where I even found this. 2 winters ago, I was over at the UNC Asheville Library Archive, digging through pre-war yield bulletins for an unrelated project on Depression-era soil amendments. Buried in a folder of state extension material, I pulled a 1954 NC State Extension Circular on home vegetable pest control. Right there on the page, plain as day, was the recommendation. 1 ounce of laundry or Castile soap shaved per gallon of water. Listed as the standard treatment for tomato hornworm and cabbage looper, not a folk remedy, not a footnote. The recommendation, and it was not unusual. Soap-based insecticidal sprays were standard extension guidance from roughly 1900 through the 1950s across most of the country. Land-grant universities printed it. County agents taught it. Grandmothers knew it. Then something changed. By 1972, that same circular series had been revised. The soap line was gone. In its place, Sevin, which is carbaryl, and malathion, branded synthetic pesticides. Here is the part most people do not connect. After World War II, the country was sitting on enormous surplus chemical manufacturing capacity. The same production lines that built wartime chemistry needed a peacetime market. Agricultural pesticides were the obvious civilian outlet for organophosphate and carbamate output. Sevin hit the consumer market in 1958. Malathion followed close behind. The economics was straightforward. A patented branded product can be sold for $20 to $30 a bottle. A bar of soap cannot. So the stakes for you and me are this. Since the late 1970s, home gardeners have been paying $20 to $30 a bottle for products that, in my testbed, consistently underperform a method that costs about 11 cents a gallon to mix. 40 years of household pest control budget gone on a problem your grandmother solved for a nickel. Now I want to be honest with you. I won't pretend I believed the bulletin worked until I actually tested it. So I tested it. Year 1 was 2022. I had the photocopy of that 1954 circular sitting on my workbench, and I figured the worst that could happen was I'd lose a few tomato plants and have a story to tell. I picked 1 row in the test bed, 6 Cherokee purple plants, and I followed the bulletin's instructions exactly as written. Let me walk you through the recipe because the details matter, and most of the modern internet versions of this get it wrong in ways that will cost you. The bulletin called for 1 ounce of laundry or Castile soap, shaved fine, dissolved into 1 gallon of water. That is it. No surfactant booster, no essential oil, no dish detergent, 1 ounce per gallon. I used a kitchen scale to weigh the shavings the first time because I wanted to be honest about the ratio. After a couple of seasons, I learned what an ounce of shaved bar soap looks like in my hand. But if you are doing this for the first time, weigh it. The soap you use matters more than almost anything else in this method. You want a true fatty acid soap. That means Castile, the plain unscented kind, no peppermint, no lavender, no added moisturizers, or a plain laundry bar soap like Fell's Naphtha. I tested both. Both work. What does not work, and what I want to be very clear about, is dish detergent. I will come back to that in a few minutes because it is the single most common reason people try this method, fail, and conclude it is folk nonsense. The application is straightforward. I shave the bar into warm water and stir until it dissolves. The water turns slightly cloudy, like weak tea with milk in it. I pour the gallon into my Chapin pump sprayer. I walk out to the bed in the evening, and I do mean the evening, not midday. I will get to why, and I spray the plants thoroughly. Top of the leaf, bottom of the leaf, and direct hits on any hornworm I can see. The bottom of the leaf is where you're going to find them, usually clinging to the underside of a stem near the growing tip. The first time I sprayed that row in 2022, I went back out at dawn the next morning with a flashlight and counted. 3 hornworms were already dead on the stems. By the end of 48 hours, every worm I had marked on that row was gone. And by gone, I mean dead in place, not migrated, not pupated. I picked them off with my fingers and dropped them in a bucket. I have 3 years of notebook pages on this one in the garage, and the first year's count is in pencil because I was hurrying out to the bed before I lost the light. That right there is the kind of result that does not appear in a single garden centre handout I have ever picked up. And that should tell you something about whose interests those handouts are written to serve. All right, let us keep going because the recipe alone is not the whole story. The next question, the question my chemistry teacher brain could not let go of, was why does this work? Why does a 1-cent dose of fatty acid soap kill a tobacco hornworm faster than a synthetic pyrethrin engineered specifically to do that job? Here is the science, and I will translate as I go. A hornworm, like almost every insect, breathes through small openings along the side of its body called spiracles. The spiracles are essentially the worm's lungs. They are the air intake. The worm's body is also coated with a thin, waxy layer called the cuticle. That cuticle is what keeps the worm from drying out in the sun and what keeps water from flooding into it when it rains. The cuticle is a fat. It is a hydrocarbon, chemically similar to the fats you would find in a stick of butter or a bar of soap. Now, what does soap actually do chemically? A bar of soap is made of fatty acid salts. When you mix it with water, those salts behave like a bridge between fat and water. That is the whole reason soap cleans grease off a dish. The fatty acid end grabs onto fats and oils and the other end stays dissolved in the water. So when I spray that soap solution onto a hornworm, 2 things happen at once. The fat in the soap dissolves the fat coating on the worm. The cuticle breaks down. And as the cuticle breaks down, the soap solution floods through the spiracles into the worm's breathing system. The worm suffocates because its lungs are full of liquid, and it dehydrates because its waterproof coating is gone, both at the same time. That is why it dies so fast, not poison. Mechanical and chemical working together on every hornworm that gets a direct hit. Now here is the part that I think is the most interesting and the part that frankly explains the whole rest of this video. That mechanism cannot be patented. There is no novel molecule. There is no proprietary delivery system. It is just chemistry. The same chemistry your grandmother used to wash her dishes and the same chemistry the 1954 Extension Service was happy to put in a public pamphlet. A synthetic pyrethrin, on the other hand, is a specific engineered molecule with a registration number, a patent history, and a marketing budget. The synthetic product can be sold, the soap method cannot, and that is exactly the kind of distinction that determines what ends up in the standard literature and what gets quietly written out of it. So let me show you what that meant in the test bed in 2023. This was season 2 for me on this method, and I wanted a real comparison, not a guess. I planted 2 rows of Cherokee purple. Same age, transplants out of the same flat, same bed, same drip line, same mulch depth. The only thing different between the 2 rows was what I sprayed when the hornworms showed up in the 3rd week of July. One row got my soap mix, 1 ounce of Fell's naphtha shaved into a gallon of water, sprayed in the evening. The other row got a 32-ounce ready-to-use pyrethrin spray my neighbour swore by. $23 a bottle at the garden centre. I bought one specifically to test against. Here is what I counted. I walked both rows the morning of the application, marked every visible hornworm on every plant with a little dab of nail polish from the wife's drawer, and wrote the totals in the notebook. Soap row, 24 hornworms. Pyrethrin row, 25 hornworms. I sprayed each row according to label directions for the commercial product and according to the 1954 bulletin for the soap. Then I waited 48 hours. 48 hours later, the soap row had 23 dead hornworms out of 24, 96%. The one survivor was tucked up under a leaf I'd missed on the underside spray, and once I hit it directly, it was dead by the next morning. The pyrethrin row, same 48-hour window, had 17 dead out of 25, 68%. 8 live hornworms still working on those plants. I followed the label and did a second application on day 4, and that brought the kill rate up. But I'd already lost noticeable leaf area on that row that I never lost on the soap row. Now let me give you the cost math, because this is the part that bothered me the most when I added it up. The Fells Naphtha bar was $1.29 at the hardware store. 1 ounce shaved is about an eighth of a bar. So my cost for a gallon of finished soap spray was roughly 11 cents. The pyrethrin product, $23 for 32 ounces ready to use, works out to about $7 per gallon of finished spray once you account for the dilution. 11 cents versus $7 per gallon. To do a worse job, slower, and require a second application. And that is exactly the kind of comparison you will not find printed in any garden centre handout, because the garden centre is not in the business of selling you Fells Naphtha. All right, let us keep going, because there are 3 more things about this method that most people who have heard of soap spray still get wrong, and any one of them will sink your results. First is timing. You spray in the evening or in the early morning, not midday. I learned this the hard way in the first season. I had an afternoon free, sprayed at about 1 o'clock on a hot August day, and came back the next morning to find scorched patches on the upper leaves of half my row. The soap film on the leaf surface amplifies UV. It acts almost like a thin lens. Combine that with direct sun on a 90-degree afternoon, and you will burn your own plants worse than the hornworms ever would. Evening application gives the spray time to do its work on the worms while the sun is down, and by mid-morning the next day the film has settled into the cuticle and the burn risk is gone. Second is the detergent trap. If you go on the internet right now and search for homemade hornworm spray, 9 recipes out of 10 are going to tell you to use a squirt of Dawn. Do not do this. Dawn is a detergent, not a soap. Those are not the same chemistry. Detergents are synthetic surfactants engineered to break the surface tension of grease in your sink, and they contain compounds that can phytotoxify tomato leaves at the concentrations you would use for pest control. I tested this directly. Side by side, same dilution. Soap on one plant and Dawn on another. The Dawn plant had leaf yellowing on the sprayed foliage within 72 hours. The Fells Naphtha plant looked fine. The 1954 bulletin specifies laundry soap or Castile soap, and there is a reason for that specificity. They knew the chemistry. You want true fatty acid soap, not a synthetic surfactant. Third is the spot test. I always test on a single leaf in the evening and wait a full 24 hours before I spray the whole bed. Most commercial hybrid tomatoes shrug off the soap mix without a flinch, but I have found that some heirlooms react more than the hybrids do. Brandywine in particular is touchy. I once burned the lower leaves on a Brandywine that was perfectly fine on the same dilution 2 weeks earlier. The difference was just that the plant was a little drought stressed that day. Test the leaf, wait, then spray the bed. That one extra day will save you a whole season of regret. And again, this kind of practical specificity is the sort of thing you used to find in extension bulletins and you do not find in modern garden centre literature, because the modern literature is built around products that come with a printed label and a warranty. Now, before I get into why this method got buried, I want to share something with you. If what I'm walking you through here is making sense, if you are the kind of gardener who is already gardening but wants significantly better results out of the same plot, everything I'm showing you in this video is one piece of a larger system I wrote down in my book, Steve's 30-Day Maximum Yield Protocol. The hornworm method lives in Chapter 9, which is the troubleshooting chapter for the 7 most common yield killers, and it includes a diagnostic flowchart for pest pressure. That puts this method in context with the rest of the pest problems most gardens run into. 115 pages. $17 at stevesgardenbooks.com. If you're watching this on your television, grab your phone and point the camera at the QR code on screen. If you're on your phone or your laptop, the link is in the description below. Take your time pulling that up. I will be right here when you get back. All right, let us talk about why this disappeared. There are 3 drivers and none of them are conspiratorial. They are just incentives, and once you see them lined up, the whole thing makes sense. The first driver is the simplest. Soap cannot be patented. There is no protectable intellectual property in telling people to shave a bar of Fells Naphtha into a gallon of water. No company is going to fund the research, no company is going to fund the marketing, and no company is going to send a sales rep to your county extension office with a glossy brochure. The economic engine that pushes recommendations into the public literature does not exist for unpatentable solutions. It is not that anyone decided to suppress soap, it is that nobody had a reason to keep pushing it. The second driver is the one I find genuinely sobering when I think about it. After World War II, the United States had enormous surplus manufacturing capacity in organophosphate and carbamate chemistry. The same production lines that had been making wartime chemicals needed a peacetime market. Agricultural pesticides were the obvious civilian outlet. 7, which is carbaryl, came out of that chemistry. Malathion came out of that chemistry. Those products needed to sell, and they needed to be recommended by trusted institutions to gain traction. The Extension Service literature was one of the trusted institutions, and through the 1950s and 1960s, those recommendations gradually shifted. The third driver is regulatory. In 1972, FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide and Rodenticide Act, was significantly amended under the Federal Environmental Pesticide Control Act, which tightened EPA registration requirements for anything recommended as a pesticide. A generic bar of soap is not a registered pesticide. It cannot be registered as a pesticide because there is no manufacturer with an exclusive claim who would pay the registration fees. After 1972, a state extension service could not legally print a recommendation for an unregistered product for pest control. So the soap recommendation came out of the updated circulars, not because anyone proved it did not work, but because the regulatory framework could not accommodate it. I want to be honest with you about the counter-argument here. Modern targeted pesticides like BT, Bacillus thuringiensis are genuinely useful and have a real place in the home garden. I use BT myself for certain cabbage worm problems. This is not a story about modern pesticides being uniformly bad. It is a story about a method that worked, cost nothing, and was removed from the standard literature, not because it stopped working, but because nobody could make money on it and the regulations did not have a category for it. The personal cost to you, the gardener, is concrete. Every home gardener who has bought a $25 bottle of pyrethrin or pyrethroid spray over the last 40 years has been paying for a problem their grandmother solved for a nickel. All right, let me make good on what I promised at the top of the video. The one ingredient that doubles how long this spray lasts on the leaf. By the third season, 2024, the soap mix had earned its place in my pest control toolkit, but I had one problem with it. The residue did not last. I would spray a row in the evening, get good kills on the hornworms that were already there, and then 3 days later, a quarter inch of rain would come through and wash the protection off the foliage. The next wave of worm, and there is always a next wave, would land on clean leaves and start chewing. So in the test bed that season, I ran 4 additives against a control: powdered milk, molasses, cornstarch, and plain vegetable oil. 1 row each, same Cherokee purple, same soap base mix, just a different additive in each gallon. I measured residue presence by spraying a fluorescent dye marker with the mix and checking the leaves under UV every 24 hours. Powdered milk clumped in the sprayer and gave inconsistent coverage. Molasses attracted ants. I had ant trails on the foliage within a day. Cornstarch settled out at the bottom of the tank and would not stay suspended. The winner was vegetable oil. 1 teaspoon of plain corn oil or sunflower oil per gallon of finished soap mix. The oil emulsifies with the fatty acid soap and creates a thin, hydrophobic film on the leaf cuticle. What I mean by that is the oil and the soap combine to leave a water-repelling layer on the leaf surface that holds the active soap chemistry in place much longer than the soap alone. My measurements from the test bed, plain soap mix, had measurable residue for about 3 days and washed off cleanly with the first quarter-inch rain event. Soap plus oil mix held measurable residue for 6 to 7 days and survived 2 light rain events of under a quarter-inch each. That is where the doubling claim comes from. 6 to 7 days against 3. One important caveat, and this one is non-negotiable. Once you add the oil, evening application is mandatory. No exceptions. The oil film amplifies sun damage even more than the soap alone does, and a midday spray with oil in the mix will scorch your leaves badly. Evening only, period. And here is the suppression beat that frustrates me the most. The 1954 bulletin actually mentions, almost in passing, that, quote, A small amount of light oil may extend the persistence of the application. But by the time the same circular series was reissued in the mid 1960s, that specific note had been edited out. I had to rediscover the ratio myself, in my own test bed, 60 years after somebody at NC State had already written it down and then watched it get cut from the next edition. All right, before I let you go, one more thing. Everything I just walked you through works best on a plant that is already strong to begin with, and that is the piece I cannot fit into a single video. In my book, Steve's 30-day maximum yield protocol, Chapter 5 lays out the 3-phase feeding calendar I use: establishment, flowering, fruiting, with a diagram showing exactly which amendment goes in at which stage. Plants on that calendar build stronger cell walls and shrug off hornworm pressure before the soap spray ever has to do its job. It is 115 pages, $17 at stevesgardenbooks.com. If you're watching on your television, grab your phone and point it at the QR code on screen. If you're on a phone or laptop, the link is in the description below. Take your time pulling it up. I will be right here. So that is the trick. A $1 bar of plain soap, 1 ounce shaved per gallon of water, 1 teaspoon of vegetable oil to make it stick, and you have a hornworm treatment that beats a $23 bottle and was in every state extension circular until somebody decided it was economically inconvenient to keep printing it. Now you know what was in your grandmother's pest control toolkit, and you can put it back into yours this weekend. The next video I am putting together is on a 1940s soil amendment technique I tested for 2 seasons against a modern fertilizer protocol, and the older method outperformed it on yield per plant. I will have that one for you soon. All right, that is what I have for you today. I will see you in the next one.